I'm gonna make this place your home. So now it'll all be clear. Don't pay no mind to the demons that fill you with fear. Trouble in life drag you down. You can love, you can always be found. So you're not alone. So I'm gonna make this place your home.
Hello, my name is Matthew Heller. I am a second year family medicine resident over at Good Samaritan Hospital over at West Islip, New York. Today's date is October 16th. This is a rehearsal for my lecture that's going to be given at Babylon Library on October 18th. And for many of you who were unable to sign up because the class was filled and the wait list was quite long, I may be posting it sometime in the near future. When I first found out that 95 people were signed up, I thought to myself, how many of those people would actually show up? And it looked like a lot of you came, so I'm happy about that. Except I do see a chair over there, so I guess that guy must have forgot. So anyway, I hope you enjoy my lecture. It's going to be about an hour long. And before I begin, I'm just going to tell you real briefly a little bit about myself. I was born in Huntington Hospital back in 1986. Went through the Half Hour Hills School District. For my undergrad, I went over to New York Institute of Technology in Old Westbury. And for med school, I went over to New York College of Osteopathic Medicine. So I've been local throughout my education. And now I am currently in my family medicine residency over at Good Samaritan Hospital. So what are today's goals, and what am I going to try and get to you today? Today I'm going to show you guys how the memory works. I'm going to show you different solutions that's going to help you remember. I'm going to show you the difference between normal age forgetting and dementia. Keep in mind that normal age forgetting is common among us as we age, and that we need to be able to differentiate what is normal versus what is not normal. And then we're going to talk about when you need to see a doctor. And my number one goal for today is for you all to remember what you learn here. So as a brief introduction, I'm going to begin telling you how the memory works. The memory is broken down to three different stages. You have the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. The sensory memory is the first stage in the memory process. It's a very brief recognition by what the mind takes in through its senses. So everything you see, everything that you hear, everything that you touch, everything that you smell, everything that you taste. In today's world, we are surrounded by our senses, which tell us more about what's going on around us and our environment. So much of what the eye sees, much of what you hear, is all thrown out into the garbage immediately, with no record or no reason that you really need to record it. It's only when you pay attention to the specific detail will it enter the second phase of memory, which is your short-term memory. The short-term memory may be thought of as your conscious thought. It's something that is on your mind at any given moment. There's only a very small amount of material that can be holding your mind at any one moment. Experts believe that you can hold up to 5 to 7 items. Many of these material will soon be forgotten in about 5 to 10 seconds, unless it is continually repeated or you transfer it over to your long-term memory. However, not all information that registered in a short-term memory goes into your long-term memory, as many of it will be thrown out. Let's look, for example, when a person looks at a phone number in a phone book. They dial the number, they close the book, then that number soon be forgotten. That phone number only made it into the short-term memory. There was no need for it to enter the long-term memory. Long-term memory is like the memory bank. It's the largest component of the memory system. The amount of information that can be held in the memory bank is practically limitless. A common misconception is that as we get older, the amount of information in this memory bank becomes less, which is not true. Long-term memory refers to events that occurred a long time ago. In fact, long-term memory holds information that was learned as recently as a few minutes ago. So, what would be considered a long-term memory? Your name? My name? Oh, by the way, anybody even remember my name? If you do, then it has entered your long-term memory. Where you spent the last Thanksgiving? How do you turn on your car? The point is, the long-term memory refers to any information that is no longer in your conscious thought, but it is stored in your potential recollection. Next, I have a model of how the memory works. Information that is first perceived through our senses enters the sensory memory. If it is not given any attention to, for example, when you're driving and you look to the side of the road and you see a tree, you're not going to pay any attention to it, and it soon be forgotten. But if we do pay attention to what our senses are telling us, the information goes into our working memory. From here, it may still be forgotten, but especially if we pay no further attention. If, however, we maintain that memory via rehearsal, it will undergo elaborative encoding and will be stored in the long-term memory, as we can see right over here. Once it enters the long-term memory, you have it in your memory bank, and it can either be transferred back into your working memory when you need the information, or it can soon be forgotten. And I will talk to you about ways to get it back into your working memory. Information in our long-term memory can either be forgotten or retrieved, and it will be most effective at getting information from our sensory memory to our long-term memory if we pay attention to only what is important and what needs to be remembered. Are you guys ready for an example? Let's say on a Saturday morning you enter the bakery and see that many freshly baked items, which makes many sensory impressions on you. These sensory impressions may or may not register in your conscious thought. So you take a moment, you notice the freshly baked chocolate chip cookies in the process of being made, and it's being offered at a great price. If you moved on because you realized the doctor would not approve, since your diabetes has been out of control recently, your impression of the cookies is in your short-term memory, and it had not been entered into your long-term memory and will soon be forgotten. However, you pay more attention to the chocolate chip cookies by noting its smell, texture, the amount of chocolate chip in them, and imagining how good it would taste, especially after tonight's dinner. You will probably transfer the image of the cookie into your long-term memory. This information will be available for retrieval in the future. And here are the pictures of the chocolate chip cookies that I was talking to you. And notice the website that I got it from, how to get a marriage proposal with a batch of chocolate chip cookies. I'm sure this worked. So let's talk about the definition of remembering. It's defined as learning and storing information so that it can be retrieved at some future time. So this is getting information from your long-term memory back into your short-term memory. And what you need to do in order to retrieve the information at the time that it is needed. So, in remembering, to get information from your short-term memory to your long-term memory is described as a process that requires a number of mental tasks. Often these tasks are automatic, such as paying attention to something, reasoning through associating it with something that you already know. But these tasks can be done automatically and it can be done consciously. These tasks give deeper meaning to the information and strengthen our chances of remembering it. So how do we get information into our long-term memory from our short-term memory? We can use attention versus association. Attention is the first step in the process of encoding the information, again from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. By paying attention is one of the tasks of short-term memory. At any moment, countless pieces of information are competing in that short-term memory. And remember what I said, you only have 5 to 7 pieces of information that can be stored in your short-term memory at one time. So you have all this information that are competing for that one area in order to be either soon forgotten or sent into the long-term memory. It may take some conscious effort on your part to focus on attention, to focus your attention on what you need to remember. But keeping in mind an amount of material you can hold in your short-term memory, again, is very limited. So you really need to focus on what is really important for you to remember. For example, you're supposed to meet a friend for dinner at 5 p.m. You don't pay any particular attention when the time is discussed on the phone, and you arrive at 5:30 because you wrote it down incorrectly. The next time, resolve to focus your attention on the details of time and place, and be sure you write them down correctly, and be sure that you're focusing your attention only on the telephone conversation and not on the million of other things you're doing around the house. This is an example of where you believe you were paying enough attention to encoding the information, but clearly it was not enough. Everyone had had this experience many times. We give superficial attention to a piece of information, and then we get frustrated when we can't remember it exactly. One of the simplest ways to improve your memory is to realize the importance of focusing your attention on what you really want to remember. In the future, every time you forget something, ask yourself if the problem was inadequate attention. The next way of encoding information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory is through association. Aware of it or not, new information is encoded into your long-term memory by connecting it with other well-known or relevant information that already exists in the long-term memory. Much of this is done unconsciously, but you can make a conscious effort to associate something you want to remember with something you already know. So the more effort you make and the greater number of cross references, you're more likely to recall at will. For example, when you meet someone for the first time, your memory of that person may be encoded by making numerous associations, such as what they look like, where you met, what kind of work they do, where they live. You may associate that they dress similar to another group of friends, or they live in the same neighborhood as another group of friends, or they work in the medical field. In the future, when you meet new people with these similar associations, or visit the same neighborhood, you may remember this new person that you met. So remember that time when you met someone who lived in a particular town, and then you met somebody else who lived in the same town. You say, oh wait, I know this person, I know someone else who lives in the same town as you. And it's association that enters your long-term memory. So now the information is in your long-term memory, and now you need to get it back into your short-term memory so that you can answer the specific question when given at a certain time. For example, when you're watching the game show Jeopardy! Retrieval is the process of getting information from long-term memory into your conscious state of your short-term memory. The most common complaint I hear among the elderly is that they're unable to bring to mind information on demand. There's two ways information that you have processed and stored in your long-term memory is able to get back into your short-term memory, and that is through recall and recognition. So when you're able to recall something, it's a self-initiated search in your long-term memory for information. It's often triggered by a cue. A cue can be something like an event, a thought, a picture, a word, or a sound that triggers the retrieval of information from long-term memory. For example, remembering the last name of a person when giving the first name. Let's look at the name Ronald Reagan, for example. You can't remember the name of the president, but then somebody gives you the name Ronald, and you immediately think of Reagan. That word was your cue to remembering. The next way to get your information from your long-term memory into your short-term memory is through recognition. Recognition is perceiving the information that is presented to you as something or someone you already know. In most cases, it's easier than recall. You know, this is where people say, I can't remember names, but I can never forget a face. They present themselves for recognition. Remembering names involves recall of information from long-term memory, for which the face is acting as your cue. So the complaint of forgetting, which we all complain of at some point in our lives, the definition is, or just keep in mind that no one can remember everything. Forgetting is common among us, especially when we become older, and in many cases, it's a normal variant to forget once in a while. It's making decisions about what information is valuable and worth the effort it takes to encode into your long-term memory. For example, do you really need to know the substitute woman who teaches your yoga class once a month? Or is it better to know the name of your grandson's new wife? I think we can both agree that it's better to know the name of your grandson's new wife. So what are some reasons for not remembering? Some information may never get into the memory bank in the first place. It only gets as far as the sensory memory or the short-term memory, as we have seen on that model. So, for example, you don't pay enough attention. You didn't really hear the information correctly. You didn't really understand it. You didn't care to remember it. You became distracted, or you just felt that you didn't need to remember the information. Some of the memory that do enter the memory bank may be overridden by subsequent similar information that make the original information irretrievable. For example, you eat similar type of breakfast every day. You get up every morning, you eat cereal for breakfast. You may forget what type of breakfast of cereal you had that morning, but let's say one morning you made a trip to IHOP with your grandkids and you ate a whole plate of pancakes. That plate of pancake will remain in your memory than any particular cereal morning where you eat cereal. And many information for which you have few association and little background knowledge is harder to remember. For example, you get a new iPhone. You never even had a phone in the first place, and now you have an iPhone. And for the first time, you're trying to use it. You may not remember all the details and applications, but as your background knowledge increases, you will remember more. Some more reason that you may not remember the information that you normally can. Some information may only be remembered when the proper cues are available, and these cues are not part of everyday life. So when you're reflecting on a yearbook from your days in high school, many of your classmates will think you've forgotten until you find an old photo and go to a class reunion, and the cues there help you remember. Some people believe that some memories fade away. They are not readily available at all times. For example, for those that took Spanish in high school or undergrad, you may recall or recognize many of the vocabulary words you have learned. However, there are undoubtedly many other words that you have no recollection of and no longer recognize. Memories have the potential to change over time. A common misconception is the information stored in your long-term memory remains stable. If an event is recounted from time to time over a number of years, we are more likely to retain a memory of it. However, the content of the memory is also likely to be changed. As we reflect upon it, we unconsciously reconstruct it based on what had happened to us in the interim. This is why participants in the same event often have very different recollections of it after time had passed. So let's recap on what we learned so far. Your senses are constantly being at work by everything you see, everything you hear, everything you smell, everything you feel, everything you taste. This is everything going around 24/7. Even when you close your eyes at night, your ears are still working. And thoughts are still entering your head. What you choose to pay particular attention to will be entered into your short-term memory. Or you can choose to encode this information into your long-term memory, or you can forget it. Successfully encoding information into your long-term memory involves attention and association. Now, to get the information back out of your long-term memory, like when the example I gave before, you're on the game show Jeopardy, you need to retrieve the information, which can be done by two ways, by recall and recognition. I am going to pause the video now, and we will begin part 2 shortly.